Hello. I just had a really beautiful conversation with a woman named Jane Kennedy who lives in South Africa. And I first encountered Jane through a film on YouTube, a short film on YouTube that just touched me so deeply that I had to reach out to her and invite her to this conversation. And we talk about everything from nature and touching the earth and her pilgrimage to Japan and just spirituality and the sacred. And then we talk in the full conversation about trauma, about the work of somatic experiencing, about how important it is to come into our bodies in a more full way than we're, I think, used to in our modern culture. And Jane had previously in her life been involved in the television industry, and so she's very much a storyteller and just a creative and beautiful spirit. And so I'm so happy to share this conversation with you. And I do hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed having it. So welcome. Welcome to The Sacred Everywhere. I'm Dr. Sheri Kling, and in this space we explore how the sacred shows up in real life, in our questions, our struggles, our longing, and our hope. Can we find the sacred in every place and everyone? Let's see. Welcome, Jane Kennedy, to The Sacred Everywhere. So good to have you.
Thank you, Sheri. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so you live in South Africa, is that right?
I do. I live in a place, has two names actually. It's the Garden Route is the commonly called the Garden Route, but it's also called Eden. And the
Really?
municipality in the area is the Eden municipality, because we all think that this is heaven on earth and
Yes.
Eden,
Yeah,
the Garden of Eden.
where it all began.
Yeah, exactly.
In some
Um,
tellings,
and
anyway.
Yeah, well, indeed. I mean, there's sort of interesting parallels there if you think about the origins of man from an anthropological point of view as well, also
Right,
supposedly
exactly.
South Africa. Mm.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the garden route is stretches from a city called George up to an area called Storms River Mouth. And there are a
Mm,
string of little villages along the coast between a range of mountains called the
mm,
Outeniqua Mountains,
mm.
which are quartz mountains, and then there's this really fertile earth, and then the ocean. So it's a very beautiful, very soft, very lovely part of the world.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. And how long have you lived there?
I have been in this area since 2015. I moved up here from Cape Town. I lived in Cape Town before that.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so I moved up here. My sister and my younger brother both live here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was needing a change, or life had brought a change upon me.
Yeah.
And
As it
so
as
I,
it
I,
does.
I moved up. Yeah.
As it does.
And so I moved up here.
Wow.
I've only been living in my current house for just over a year.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in a nature reserve
Mm.
um, before this, which was very beautiful but very remote and
Ah,
quite isolated. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I first encountered you through a film that popped up on my YouTube feed before I had even known anything about the channel. The channel is
No.
Reflections of Life, and you
Mm.
were featured in two films that they did. And the first one that I saw was What Happens When You Stop Forcing Life.
Right.
And what struck me about it, well, first, I think it opened with your laughter. And you have such an infectious laugh. And I was drawn in immediately to you and and like, who is this woman who's laughing so beautifully in this film? And and in general, I've been, of course, now addicted to watching their films, and they're so beautiful. They're,
Yes.
15, 16 minute, 12-minute beautiful films about humans and human life.
Yeah.
And in this first one that I watched, there was also a moment where you were talking about the way your life had opened up, and then you put your hand on your face and you talked about becoming your own elder.
Mm,
And it was such a beautiful moment. Like it really, I mean, we could see how you were coming to this new place in that moment,
mhm.
which is so beautiful to
Yeah.
capture that.
Well, Michael Raimondo is the filmmaker who makes those films. He
Hmm.
films them and his partner edits them. He takes the footage home and he just hands it over to her and she
Wow.
picks it up. And I think he's something of a wizard because
Mm.
he has such a really good quality of listening.
Mm.
And he creates an environment where you feel completely safe.
Wow.
Um, and and yeah, it just came upon me, and even as you mentioned it now, it makes me a little emotional, I must say,
Yeah.
because I slip out of contact with that
Of
reality.
of course, as we all do, right? Right. We get these
Yeah,
beautiful insights. It's harder to hold on to them.
right. Yeah. But I'm lucky that I have the film. I can always watch it again
Yeah, yeah.
if I lose my way in the forest, you
That's
know.
right. That's right. Yeah, and in fact, that was part of that, I think, wasn't part of that film where you talked about your pilgrimage to, was it Tibet?
Japan.
To
Japan.
Japan. And
Mm,
you're getting lost as way that opened up new ways. So maybe you
absolutely.
can talk about that trip, but also has that been kind of a metaphor for your life?
That's really interesting. And yes, I think the short answer is absolutely yes, it has been a metaphor for my life. In terms of the trip, it I'd always wanted to go to Japan. It had been on my bucket list for my entire life. And I had this idea that I was never going to get there, that it was too expensive and it was just too far away and out of my reach. And then I was living, as I said, in this nature reserve, and I had a very unfortunate incident in the middle of the night where a man broke into the house.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I was fine in the end, but I realized that I could have died that night. And
Wow.
I decided I was not going to wait any longer to do the things I've been wanting to do all my life. And that's what made me decide that I was going to find the money and get myself to Japan to
Yeah.
walk, specifically to walk the Shikoku pilgrimage.
Oh.
It's a pilgrimage of 88 temples around this small island. It's not a small island, actually. It's a medium island off the mainland of Japan. Um, well, in fact, there are 108 islands, temples,
Oh,
but there are
okay.
88 specifically in the pilgrimage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a Buddhist pilgrimage. The temples are Buddhist temples. And the idea is that in every temple you perform a series of rituals, um, bowing at the gates, asking for permission to enter, washing your hands at the fountain,
Yeah.
ringing the bell. They have these beautiful giant brass bells, and you ring it with like a trunk of a tree. You know,
Oh
it's
yeah,
a
yeah. I've seen that.
yeah, to let the temple beings, the temple gods know that you've arrived.
Mm-hmm.
And then lighting candles and incense and reciting the Heart Sutra,
Hmm.
which actually has its origins in the Indians. It comes from the Hindu Heart Sutra, and it's a Japanese version of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just longed for the quiet contemplation, the focused intention, and the sense of a mission, if you like,
Yeah.
that the walk was going to give me,
Mm-hmm.
um, and in fact did give me. It gave me something very particular to do, which enabled me to be
Yeah. Wow.
in a very, very real way.
And so how long
Yeah.
did that take you? How long were you there?
Well, I was there I was in Japan for a total of 7 weeks. And I didn't do the entire pilgrimage. I have to go back.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. And
I
7 weeks, you say?
Yes, the
Wow.
entire journey is
Yeah.
1,200 kilometers.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a long journey.
Hmm.
I did 300 and something. I forget exactly what it was in this moment, but I visited 44 of the temples.
Huh.
And it's interesting because the island has four prefectures, and the pilgrimage is broken into the four prefectures. The first one being awakening, the second prefecture being discipline, the third is enlightenment, and the fourth represents nirvana.
Mm.
And I began with at the very beginning, and I walked the first 23 temples of in the first prefecture of awakening. And then it had taken me longer than I'd anticipated because I went on my own. I didn't know where I was going. You can't really book much accommodation along the way because A, you don't know how long it's going to take you,
No.
and B, nobody speaks, there's very, very little English.
Wow.
And so you have to find ways to communicate or find people who can help you communicate. And they also don't use WhatsApp or the kind of telephone, the kind of communications we're used to. Most of it's done by email. So it was
Yeah.
quite a laborious process.
Mm.
And I was also very concerned about my physical capacity. I didn't know what I would be up for and
Yeah.
how well and far my body would take me.
Yeah.
So I landed up going in the first section quite slowly, and then gift of gifts, my daughter came and joined me,
Oh,
and
wow.
so I left the island and I went back to Osaka to meet her,
Oh,
and we went to Hiroshima actually, which was deeply, deeply moving. Really,
yes.
very deeply moving.
Mm.
And then we went back and to the island, and we decided to walk the last section, Nirvana.
Uh-huh. Nice.
So I
Let's go
jumped
right
from
there.
awakening to Nirvana.
Yeah. I love it.
Really, because I wanted to go slow. I didn't want to rush through the experience, and
Yeah.
realistically, that was what the most we could get done in the time that we had.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
but
And
I intend to go back.
yeah, that sounds amazing. And so what is the terrain like? Is it like mountainous or rocky or is it
It's everything. It
mm,
begins in Tokushima, which is a town, not a very large town, but quite sprawling. And you begin by literally walking on pavements through a small town. And
yeah.
then slowly, 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 you move out into more rural areas, and then you're in rice paddies and other farming areas and bamboo forests. And then
Hmm.
in the first section, between Temple 11 and 12, it's the highest elevation on the entire pilgrimage. I
Hmm.
forget the actual height of the mountain, but it's very, very high. And
Yeah.
there you are literally climbing a mountain with your backpack and your staff. Um, and it's sometimes rocky, sometimes a little bit slippery, often deep forest, so you're on pine needles and that kind of thing. Yeah, I went in 23
Hmm.
in the beginning of March 23. So in March there was still snow on in some parts of the
Oh.
path,
Uh-huh.
and then of course it turned into cherry blossoms.
Wow.
Um,
Huh.
but it was also very much still the tail end of COVID. And
Oh,
so
right.
there were not many people on the trail at all.
Hmm.
And a lot of places hadn't opened up yet. Some of the temples nowadays and before and now, you can sleep in a number of the temples that have accommodation for pilgrims. But
Oh,
at that point, none of the temples had reopened. Everyone was still wearing masks.
wow.
Um, so it was an interesting window to have gone in
Yeah.
because it meant it was quieter and more intimate.
Mm.
Um, but it also meant that in some ways, it was possibly a little more challenging. I don't know.
Yeah. So when you were saying that you couldn't really book ahead, so were you just kind of on a day-to-day basis looking for what you needed in the moment?
Yes.
Wow.
So what I did before I left South Africa was I found an Airbnb in Tokushima.
Mm.
Beautiful, beautiful original Japanese house on this property. This old couple lived in one section, and then there was a completely separate house, and that's where I stayed. And one of the reasons I chose it was because it said that they spoke English. Well, they did, but with a phone doing the translation. And
Oh.
then I got my very wonderful host to help me book a few nights accommodation.
Oh,
And I
okay.
used that as a base for a couple of days. And I went and I did a recce I went to got the bus through and went to temple number one and spoke to the people at the temple. And they also helped me, gave me a sense
Good.
of how far I'd be able to walk
Yeah.
rather, when the sun's coming through the clouds. It's
Hmm.
quite spectacular.
Yeah.
Wow. Um, and then I would book 2 or 3 nights,
Yeah.
and that's how, and then ask hosts along the way to
Hmm.
help me book the next round.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So you had, before we started recording, you told me that you had grown up in the Catholic faith, but then discovered Buddhism. So how long
Yes.
had you been practicing Buddhism before you went on this trip?
Well, I started exploring Buddhism in my 20s, and I started with Tibetan Buddhism,
Hmm.
the Buddhism of the Dalai Lama, Theravadan Buddhism, and I kind of stumbled into it. I was had just moved to Cape Town and I was a little lost.
Hmm. Hmm.
With that recurring theme. And a friend of my cousin's was going on a retreat, on a 3-week silent retreat, and she said, "Come with me." And I just, on a whim, I went with her. And the retreat was hosted and led by Akon Rinpoche, who was one of the senior Rinpoches from the Theravada tradition.
Mm.
And that was my first introduction. So it was really kind of diving in the
In
deep
the
end in
deep
a way.
end, yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
Um, and I really loved the meditation. Actually, it was my first real introduction to meditation. And I know in mysticism there's contemplative prayer, and there are forms of meditation too. But I hadn't really experienced that in the Catholicism of my youth.
Hmm.
Um, and so my 20s, and I'm very much I also spent time with exploring Zen Buddhism. There was quite a strong Buddhist emergence in a way in South Africa. I mean, I don't know how long it had been there. I think it was relatively new
Hmm.
because it was with such a restrictive society, of course, in those days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, anyway, and then uh, I in my 30s, my journey took a kind of a different turn entirely. I was doing a lot of s- psychological work, working with a therapist, and that led me into a completely different journey and some
Hmm.
um, new paths. And I don't know that I would even call myself a Buddhist. I think that's
Hmm.
really what I'm saying in a short answer.
Uh-huh.
Um, Although when I walked Shikoku, I felt completely at home in the tradition.
And so those were all Buddhist temples there in Japan?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes,
Okay.
yeah. And I still have I would not quite call it religious, but a regular meditation practice,
Uh-huh.
but not actually based in any religion. It's just I either sit on my own or I use guided meditations from various teachers,
Yeah.
but not
Yeah.
following any one tradition. Yeah,
And and you have a background in work in television and
yeah.
storytelling through various media. I'm just curious, I guess, as to what kind of stories have meant the most to you? Like what have
Right.
you really immersed yourself in? What kind of stories are do you feel are life-giving and
Mm. I think the thing that I've always that's always called me is the transformation of the human spirit.
yeah.
And it's so interesting because in a way that moment that Michael Raimondo captured of me
Yeah.
having an epiphany in on camera as I did was something that I had seeked to do in my work, and I'm not sure that I was that I got there. Actually, just a little caveat. I had worked with Michael Raimondo, the filmmaker from uh, Reflections of Life. In early 2000s, he was commissioned by our national broadcaster to do a series called The Healing Power of Nature, a
Oh,
documentary
wow.
series.
Nice.
And I filmed and directed three or four stories in that series. And that's how I met Michael.
Oh,
After
okay.
the series, we lost touch. He went in one direction and I went in another. And it was completely sort of out of the blue that he contacted me and asked me if he could come and talk to me for his
Yeah.
YouTube channel.
Nice. Oh, that's
And
great.
yeah, the healing power of nature was all about the interaction with humans and our natural environment
Hmm.
and the yeah, the way that nature heals us in very varied stories.
Yeah. If you're enjoying this conversation, I'd invite you to download my free guide, Awakening to the Sacred: 5 Keys to Experiencing the Divine. I hope to, in this guide, help you to unlock a more joyful, creative, and spirit-filled life, especially if you're hungry for a spiritual life that feels real. So check out the show notes and click on the link below to access that free guide. Thanks. And so when you went to live in the nature preserve area,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, it just and I'd love you to talk about your own journey, but I had a time in my own life where I grew up in New Jersey and then I moved to after I went to college at Purdue, I moved to the Atlanta area and I was living in Marietta, which is a suburb of Atlanta for a long time. And then I moved up to the Northeast Georgia mountains and that was a landscape that just spoke to me. And I would go and visit people, and just it was like as soon as I would be driving and could see that Yona Mountain peak, which, these are the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, so they're not huge peaks, but I would see it and I could just feel my blood pressure just drop.
Hmm.
And so there was a point where I had been working in marketing and communications in the software industry for many years in the Atlanta area. And then but I felt a pull toward pursuing my music. And so I was at that time between 2003 and 2009 was performing as a singer-songwriter and traveling and recording CDs and all of that. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I have no security where I live right now in Marietta. I might as well live where I want to live and have no security. So I
Right.
actually owned a condo at the time and I sold it and then moved up to this house in the Northeast Georgia mountains. And when I was looking for where to live, I was like on this quest. Like I wanted to connect with the divine feminine, with nature, with the land. And when and I was having trouble finding a place. And then this little house, there was an ad in the newspaper. It was a 100-year-old farmhouse on 8 acres. And I went to see it immediately and just fell in love. And one of the things I saw when I was, they had this old barn up on the hill that you could see from where I eventually put my office. And I was walking around this barn, and there was a statue of the Virgin Mary, like leaning against the barn, like it was, yesterday's trash. And I thought, well, here she is. She's calling me here. So I'm curious as to what led you to move to that place that was more remote, and that's where they filmed that those two
No,
films with
no,
you?
no,
Oh, it
no.
wasn't. Oh,
They're
okay.
here in
Oh,
here in this
really?
home.
Because that
Yes,
also looked like a beautiful environment in the film. So
yes,
you
it
must
is.
live in a nice place. Well, you live in Eden, so
Yes, we live in Eden.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes. No. I mean, the whole area is really lush. We have we live in in Fynbos. I don't know if you're aware of the Fynbos. It's the largest floral kingdom
No.
on Earth.
Wow, no.
Yeah, it has incredible variety and so many species. And I wanted to leave the city. I was definitely looking to get out of the city and to get deeper into nature.
Yeah.
Um, and I knew the reserve. My sister actually still lives there
Mm,
with her husband, so I knew the place because of them, and that was definitely part of my reason for going there.
yeah.
She was saying, come here," and she found the house that I landed up buying.
Huh.
um, but it was absolutely to be in the quiet of nature.
Yeah.
Um, but then it was quite isolated, and it was really interesting to get there. You had to go on this little pass, so down, 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 deep, all the way down to a river, across a bridge in this valley, and then up a very steep hill on the other side. And going down towards the river, there was a whole kind of tunnel of trees, or there is a whole tunnel of trees.
Mm.
And it
Wow.
always felt for me every time I went down, like I was going through a birth canal and going to come
Yeah.
out the other side as a new person.
Yeah, right. That sounds amazing.
Um, so quite very special in its own way.
Yeah.
But being here where I am now, which is Sedgefield is the name of the town.
Mm-hmm.
It's very small. It's actually quite a strange town because it sits on the national highway, the N2, one of the main roads in the country. And where the town and the road intersect, it's pretty uninspiring. There's, pet and pool and supermarkets, and
Yeah,
it's really
right.
doesn't look like a place you want to be.
Right.
But you get one row behind there, and it opens up like a little jewel box, you know.
Mm.
We have an estuary that has seven rivers that comes into it. The estuary flows out into the sea. Beautiful coastline. You can't believe the coastline. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just you can go down to the beach on any given day, and you'll find a handful of people on this
Yeah.
pristine beach that
Wow.
stretches for miles and miles and miles. There's a 14-kilometer walk we do at full moon along the coast.
Uh-huh.
It takes about 4 hours and at night, and there's just nothing. There's just pristine coast. There are
Wow.
rock pools at low tide where you can still see octopus and
Really?
all kinds of sea life. Yeah, it's a really vibrant and very, very lush
Yeah.
part of the world. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. Was it South Africa where the My Octopus
Yes.
Teacher was filmed? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh gosh,
Yes.
that movie, I
Yeah.
loved it so much. And then I just
Me
watched
too.
recently, I just watched Remarkably Bright Creatures with Sally Field.
Oh, I haven't watched it yet, but
It's
yeah,
it's
it's
beautiful.
on
And
my
I
to
know it's
watch
it's
list.
based on a fiction, not a novel. Um, but it's such a also just such a
Mm,
lovely story. And
mm,
it's so amazing to me as we discover the the intelligence of these
mm,
creatures around
mm,
us. So
mm.
tell me a little bit about what kind of creatures live around you and what kind of encounters you have with the natural world around you.
Well, in this current home, I live almost in the canopy of a circle of milkwood trees.
Hmm.
And the milkwoods are indigenous and they're protected in this area. Well, they're protected in the country, actually. You're not allowed to cut a milkwood down under any circumstances whatsoever.
Hmm.
And they're very slow growing. The trees that I live with are probably about 400 years old.
Wow.
And of course, there's all manner of bird life that
Yeah.
comes into these trees. And a couple of weeks ago, I heard a cacophony of bird sounds. And I went downstairs and into the garden and looking up into the tree, and I could see about 8 different species.
Hmm.
And they're all shouting, 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 shouting. And it's like, so I came back to get binoculars, went to go and look through the binoculars looking for a snake, because that was
Oh,
my assumption that they were chasing off a snake.
right.
And then eventually I saw a giant eagle owl.
Hmm.
And this is in the daytime. It's not even the evening or dusk or anything. And he was enormous. I don't, you
Wow.
can
Wow.
I can't put it into the screen,
Yeah.
but he was
Yeah.
just enormous. And he was just sitting very nonchalantly on one of these branches, not taking any of these birds seriously at all.
Yeah.
And it just felt like such a wondrous gift to experience. I've also had a gymnogene, which is African hawk eagle, I think he is.
Huh.
Enormous bird, fly through the canopy towards my deck, and then suddenly realized that he was sort
Yeah.
of flying into human territory and stopped himself on the edge of the trees.
Yeah.
So a lot of phenomenal bird life.
Hmm.
We dolphins and whales frequent visitors on the coastline,
Yeah.
whales depending on the time of the year, but dolphins in every day we
Hmm.
can you can see them. We also there's a lot of small creatures in this area, like tortoises. We're a slow town, and so the tortoises is our motive. Which is very nice. Great
Yeah. That's,
reminder on any
yeah.
level.
Beautiful. Now, what about things like
Um,
monkeys or, anything like that
Not
comes?
here. But they are. And in fact, there are also baboons. There are still troops of wild baboons that move through the area.
Oh, okay.
And
Wow.
that's a very delicate subject all over the Southern Cape because of the
Mm.
interaction with the collision of
Yeah.
humans and baboons. And
Yeah.
basically we're slowly stealing all of the areas and the territory that they used to roaming and foraging in. And
Right.
so then quite naturally they look for food, and humans are easy targets in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So it causes a huge amount of tension, and it's very sad because, of course, the baboons come off second best, which is very, very distressing.
It is. Yeah.
Um, on the reserve where I was living, there were some quite a few giraffe. Actually, I can't remember how many in total. A small herd of giraffe, a herd of wildebeest,
Oh,
which is
wow.
they're such funny creatures.
Oh, yeah.
They're really quite rough looking and a little sort of like a buffalo, not the same size,
Right.
more of a buck size, but with
Hmm.
these heavy shoulders and
Yeah.
so excuse me. So they
And
look
tusks, right? They have tusks.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But they're actually very docile and quite gentle. And then I knew we had them, but I'd never seen them until one morning I saw a caracal, which is like a wild cat,
Mm.
um, with these beautiful tufted ears. And I saw a
Mm.
mother with two cubs walking down the road early one morning, which was a very special sighting.
Yeah.
In fact, on Saturday, I went for a walk to gather mushrooms with a friend in a forest nearby, just 15 minutes drive away.
Hmm.
And last year, I can't remember the time of the year, she had an encounter with a leopard in that very forest that we were walking in on Saturday.
Wow.
So, and there's still wilderness,
Yeah.
amongst and around us, which is very, very special. We're very
Yeah.
privileged, very
S-
lucky.
So, where in your life on a day-to-day basis do you find the sacred, or how do
Mm.
what kind of experiences or spiritual life do you pursue?
Right. Well, as I said, I have a meditation practice which I begin most days. In fact, that's not strictly speaking true. I begin with coffee,
The
which is
essentials.
an almost sacred ritual.
It is, right? Exactly.
Closely followed by meditation. And I usually meditate on my deck outside.
Hmm.
And this canopy, these milkweeds, it's as though every leaf on these trees shines.
Mm.
And they are very, very, very alive. They are very, very present and very powerful. And this is probably going to sound crazy, but I really feel like they talk to me in a
Hmm.
way.
Hmm. Yeah.
They certainly hold me
Yeah.
with a sense of safety and protection. It's just really hard to describe, but there is just there's an embrace from these trees
Hmm.
that is godly.
Yeah.
There's no other way, that I know how to describe it, or
Yeah.
how to articulate it.
Hmm.
It is, and it makes me feel connected. I want to say remembered, and I mean that in that way of being made whole again,
Yeah. Yeah.
by being held so intimately and also so unconditionally by the trees that
Yeah.
surround me, by the nature that surrounds me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One of
yeah,
the things that I've, you know, read from others like James Hillman and people like that. I'm very interested in Carl Jung and his psychology, and Hillman was a student of Jung. And and he talks about, and I think this is so true, he talks about the need for the human soul to be in connection, to know its place within the larger whole, and to know that it's part of a larger whole that can facilitate its own wholeness. And it
yes.
sounds to me like when you're talking about the trees, you're having that kind of experience.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And it's humbling and beyond humbling.
Yeah, yeah,
There's that Rumi, the Sufi poet, he's out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. There is a
right.
field.
There's a field.
I'll meet you there.
Yeah,
When the soul lies down in that grass, even the thought, the other, has no meaning.
right,
And it's
right.
it's that feeling. It's that feeling of, it's beyond humbleness. It's just it's so right, so home,
Yeah,
so unboundaried
yeah.
or unbounded. So one.
Yeah,
Mm,
so seems to me so much of our troubles of modern life have to do with that we've lost the sense of a thou in the rest of the world.
yeah.
We just see we've been taught by Western, since the Enlightenment, by Western culture to look at the world as machine, as resources, as things we can extract and use, but not as a thou that we can be in a sacred relationship with. And when we have those experiences and encounter that something, that presence that holds us, it really can change our whole perspective on life.
Mm. I completely agree with you. And it's whenever I'm troubled, and trouble comes, we were going to have this conversation last week, and last week I was in the midst of big trouble, natural trouble, oddly enough. But the thing that threw me within the natural trouble was that we had a terrible first flooding rain, and then a week later we had incredibly high winds that
Hmm.
came through this area, and it's very, very unusual for this part of the world. And as a result, we were without electricity for 6 days. For
Ooh.
2 of those days, there was no connectivity. There
Wow.
was nothing. And that
Yeah.
you couldn't make a cell phone call. You couldn't make a payment with a credit card or with a
Right.
any other way than cash,
Right.
because it just fell down. It
Yeah.
just stopped working.
Yeah.
And and then of course there was also no water. because the
Oh,
water
right.
that comes from a reservoir, and the reservoir, they couldn't pump any
They
water
couldn't
to the
pump.
reservoir, so it ran out, you know.
Oh my goodness.
And it was those things that landed up becoming too difficult. The worrying about the food in my fridge that was going to go bad, the fear of, the
Yeah,
inconvenience of it.
right.
And then I went to a nearby village on the Saturday actually to go for a shower at my friend's house because I just really needed a shower. And, and she took me into the forest to go and find mushrooms. And
Ah,
a few steps in, I just started to feel whole and reach. I could feel myself being recharged
yeah.
through the soles of my feet.
Wow.
Um, this just gentle, soft, belonging feeling
Yeah.
started to return into my system. Yeah.
Yeah. When I lived in that house in the Northeast Georgia mountains, I began to feel like I had a relationship with that land
Yeah.
and with that
Yeah.
house, and I felt that that house seemed alive to me. It seemed, and
Yeah.
it's, and in fact, I remember friends of mine, because I moved in and I put my furniture on the porch and hung little glass jars, from the hooks and different things, and a friend of mine said, your house looks happier since you've been in there, because people would pass by. It was a house on a very busy road that curved, and it was right in the curve. And it was this really, like I said, it was 100 years old, and hardwood floors, shiplap paneling, on the walls, and just a lot of charm. And it was being rented out at that time, and so I think a series of people had lived there. But I just felt a presence in that place. But like you said, when you lived in the nature preserve, it was kind of remote. I mean, there were neighbors around, and it was, oops, dropping things. And it was, as I said, a busy road with traffic. But you couldn't just walk next door and knock at the door. And so
Mhm.
I was working from home and living in this more sort of remote little place. Now, I had friends in the community where there was an art center and would see people at the grocery store. So I wasn't completely cut off from human community in any way, but I was living alone, working from home, and it was just hard. It was hard to be
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
felt
Mm.
disconnected, even though I
Yeah.
felt so connected to the land. I
Right.
And then I decided to go back to school and moved away from there. But if I could have stayed and actually made a living work there,
Mhm.
and finding enough work, I probably never would have left that place.
Right. Well, that's why I'm so excited to have moved here because
Yeah.
I have neighbors
Hmm.
literally two stands down. When I first moved in, I met Tom, the neighbor, and he said, "Get a whistle, and if you need anything at any time, just blow that whistle and I'll come."
Oh, so sweet.
So they're in whistling distance.
Yeah.
Uh, but I don't feel their presence particularly at all, so it really is that happy place of being very connected to other people. So 5-minute walk down to the store, I can get anything I want. Um, but I'm privileged to have this incredible natural environment.
Yeah.
The estuary, we swim in the estuary every day in the summer, and it's just this wild water, fresh. Well, it's not fresh because it's tidal, so
Yeah.
there's a salt content, but it's
Hmm.
wild water that you can swim in for miles and miles and miles.
Wow.
So, so lucky. We
Yeah.
really are.
That's wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
at the times where you lived in like Cape Town, were you
Yes.
also able to find connections with something sacred there as well?
Yes, yes. Um, It certainly has always been a motivator in terms of the choices I've made as to where I was going to live in my life.
Hmm.
And in fact, my husband, my father of my child, he was studied environmental education. And when Sarah, my daughter, was a year old, we moved to the far north to quite a remote place, to a very large reserve, nature reserve,
Wow.
where he did environmental education for school groups that came in.
Oh, beautiful.
Um, yeah. And so my daughter, grew up um, naked in the mud, actually,
I love it. I love it. That's so
surrounded by
awesome.
wild animals, you know.
Yeah, that's so
So
awesome.
that's very, very much in the DNA in a way.
Yeah.
Um, and also because of this country is astonishing.
Hmm.
There are still so many large swathes of wildness, and we have the Kruger National Park. I'm sure you
Hmm.
must have heard of it,
Yeah.
which is roughly the size of the United Kingdom, I think.
Wow.
That it's huge.
Yeah.
And we were able. My father was obsessed with wildlife and with the environment, and between him and other members of his family, we got to go there when we were kids, and so the smell of the wild
Yeah.
is is something I yearn for, actually. That particular the smell of of dung, I suppose, of elephant dung
Right, right. I
and
love
dust
it.
in the air and
Yeah.
the baking sun and
Right,
rain,
right.
rain,
Wow.
fresh. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I want to bring part one of this conversation to a close, but what I'd love to get into in part two is a little bit about you're now studying somatic experiencing. And I want to
Yes.
talk a little bit about the body and trauma and healing and
Yeah.
your own movement toward that kind of work. So I'm
Mm.
really fascinated by that topic myself, and so I'd love to get into that.
Great.
All right. Thanks for listening to the first half of this episode. If you'd like to go deeper, click on the link in the show notes to access the full episode for paid subscribers of The Sacred Everywhere on Substack. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this episode far and wide. I'd love your help to grow this channel. Until next time, may you notice the sacred everywhere.